Good evening, Trace.
Good evening, Martha. The FBI says the packages were mailed in manila envelopes with computer-printed address labels, and they all had 6 forever stamps on them. Those are stamps that can be used anytime, regardless of price changes. And all of the devices had a return address of Florida Congresswoman and former DNC Chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz. As for the explosive devices inside the envelopes, authorities say they appear to be rudimentary but functional pipe bombs, all with similar construction. And it appears at least one of the devices contained projectiles, including shards of glass, clearly aimed at increasing the harm to whoever opened the package. Sources tell us there is strong evidence that these attempted attacks are the work of one group or individual. Over the past 2 days, there have been 10 reports of suspicious packages. 4 of those have been ruled out. 1 is still being investigated, and the FBI says 5 are confirmed, including a package Monday to the Bedford, New York home of billionaire liberal donor George Soros, and packages today to the Chappaqua, New York home of former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, the Washington, D.C. home of former President Obama, the New York bureau of CNN, which was addressed to former CIA Director John Brennan, and a package was also sent to former Attorney General Eric Holder, but was routed back to Wasserman Schultz's Florida office. Today, President Trump condemned what he called acts of political violence. Watch.
The full weight of our government is being deployed to conduct this investigation and bring those responsible for these despicable acts to justice. We will spare no resources or expense in this effort.
But Democratic leaders Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer pushed back on the president's statement, quoting, President Trump's words ring hollow until he reverses his statements that condone acts of violence. And CNN President Jeff Zucker also blamed the administration, quoting again, there is a total and complete lack of understanding at the White House about the seriousness of their continued attacks on the media. Of course, Republicans have blamed Democrats for inciting numerous acts of violence against Republicans. A law enforcement source also tells Fox News the choice of pipe bombs in packages is unusual because there's no easy or obvious method of detonation. But the FBI warns there could be more packages out there. Martha.
Trace, thank you very much. So now for more on this, I'm joined by James Fitzgerald, a retired FBI profiler and forensic linguist who helped to catch the Unabomber in 1996. He's also the author of A Journey to the Center of the Mind. James, good to have you back on the story tonight. Thanks for being here. When you look at the evidence so far in this case, tell me a little bit about what stands out to you.
Well, first of all, we're only 8 to 10 hours into this whole thing, and I guess George Soros found his package a few days before, so a little bit early for that. But very much remarkably, the envelope that I saw, at least the one that went to John Brennan at CNN, looked very much like some of the Unabomber's old mailings, and that is the overstamped aspects on it in the right-hand corner. Of course, he hand-wrote his documents. He would never use a computer to print out addresses. But the linguist in me noticed that Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the last name, is spelled missing a C, and John Brennan's name is missing an N. And that was kind of surprised me, and that I have a feeling that was done on purpose to make this look like somebody who doesn't really know who these people are, and that wasn't an honest mistake. If he had this much anger and vitriol against these people, you'd think he would know how to spell those names.
So you believe this is a single actor, most likely?
Almost all bombers in the past have been single bombers. They become serial bombers, of course, if they're successful and don't blow themselves up. What we have here, kind of, is a mass bomber. And it's very unusual. Kaczynski only mailed 2 bombs at the same time on one occasion. That was in '93. Mark Condit, and he only did 5 bombings back in March. He did it on I think the second and third and fourth bombings were together. And so now we have this guy who put at least 5 bombs there. So they're definitely linked. They're definitely together. These are almost always one guy. But of course, we can't rule out there was help somewhere down the line.
Yeah, what about you talked in your notes earlier about the potential that it could be a false flag. What did you mean by that, James?
Well, a false flag is they also call it black ops, some kind of an operation where a crime or a letter or something is done to make it look like it belongs to one entity when it actually, in real life, belongs to the other. And I'm by no means locked into this theory, but I'll tell you this, Martha, it either comes, these devices were either made and sent by, a right-wing guy who doesn't like the Dems. It's made by, and we can't rule out international aspects to this. Russians messed with our 2016 elections just using Facebook. Could they have done this? But of course, the other one is that false flag. And there could be someone in there, some Democrat, that, low-level person, I'm not suggesting anyone on the top, but who just decided, you know what, I'm going to put this out because 2 weeks before a major election, who's going to look like the bad guy here? The Republicans.
Fascinating. Now, you also believe that this is likely someone who wants to be discovered in some way, that they're likely to send more letters, more information if they're not found quickly.
I'm not sure they want to be discovered, Martha, but they may want to get their point across somehow. These bombs didn't, these IEDs, improvised explosive devices, didn't detonate, and that's the good news. But it sounds like they were sophisticated enough that they could have. If some kind of the triggering device was manipulated in some way, that could have happened. So, of course, the investigators are looking at all the pieces of these devices, but there may be some sort of a letter or social media aspect, a videotape or something, the equivalent to that comes in the mail, DVD, whatever, and will claim responsibility for this. But we're too early. This person had a point they wanted to make with these devices, and quite frankly, they've made them.
Yeah, I'll say. We're going to stay on it, James. I hope you'll come back because you always have such fascinating information about how this kind of investigation is handled from all your own experience. So good to see you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha.
So for more on the politics that are involved in all of this, and I should mention we just have a little bit of a delay. So if it seems, like we're stepping on each other, that's why. Ari Fleischer joins me, former White House press secretary to President George W. Bush, now a Fox News contributor, and Richard Goodstein, Democratic strategist and former advisor to the Clintons' presidential campaigns. Gentlemen, good to have both of you with us tonight. I want to start with the finger-pointing element of this. This is just one example. This is a tweet earlier today from Joe Scarborough of MSNBC, and it says the unrelenting hatred churned up by Donald Trump for the 2 years following 2016 is dangerous. A Washington Post columnist is dead, and progressive icons are the targets of bombs. Ari, what's your reaction to that tonight?
Oh, Martha, if ever there was a time for the pundits and the politicians to keep their mouths closed and their minds open, this is now. Nobody should speculate because nobody knows. The only proper course is to let the investigators investigate. And whoever they determine is behind this, at that point, that person deserves the full opprobrium of everybody. But to guess it's anybody, this could even be a totally non-political person, just a whack job. So none of us should be in a position of blaming anybody. Let's just wait, don't speculate, and let the investigators do their jobs.
Richard, there were obviously Jeff Zucker as well, as we just saw, and obviously, emotions very raw at CNN, and understandably so. A very frightening day for them and for all the people who were on the receiving end of these bombs. This is an incredibly charged climate. We see, on a obviously less potentially violent level, what we've, watched in terms of people being chased out of restaurants. All of this, has been coming in pretty forceful ways on all sides, Richard.
Yeah, I guess I, subscribe to what Ari just said about let's not go too far before we know the facts. Not a bad premise for any one of these subjects. Secondly, though, what the president said today about unity and coming together, that's great. What I think everybody wants to see, I hope it's true for Republicans, it's certainly true for Democrats, is let's see what happens the next time people talk about locking her up. Incidentally, her up? All these people around him are going to jail, locking her up, about Democrats being the mob, about all these very personal things that ended up being on the receiving end of these bombs today. Could it be a false flag? Of course. But the fact of the matter is, if the president doesn't use an opportunity, which he didn't use in Charlottesville, and he didn't use in other circumstances around the Scalise shooting, for example, to dial it back. Incidentally, this analogy to Scalise is crazy. No Democrat said go after Steve Scalise Donald Trump has named every single one of these people today by name. So I just think it's on him as the president of the country with the loudest microphone in the world to just step it back, show some leadership if he really means it about unity.
You know, Ari, I heard a lot of different commentary today, people saying that they wanted, in one situation, they wanted the president to apologize for the things that he said. And, you know, if what both of you are saying is true, that we need to step back for a moment and wait until this investigation runs its course, it feels a little early to be jumping to those kinds of conclusions and demanding apologies by anyone for what is likely to be some crazy person's idea of some sort of political act.
Exactly, Martha. And he just said step back while he just blamed Donald Trump. So I'm just not going down that road. Look, there is a time in politics that everybody has to rise up and do what's right. We all know how politics can be. We all know that it has both good sides and bad sides. If ever is a time for the good side, it's now. And everybody needs to practice it, not just in word, but in deed. You don't say, I'm not going to criticize, and then criticize. But here's what also worries me about what could be next, Martha, and that's because I was there during the anthrax attack in October of 2001. And that was followed. That was a time when people were dying, opening their mail because anthrax was being sent around to media outlets and to Senate offices and other places. Postal Service workers died. What I worry about now is copycat attacks. We had so many copycats after the anthrax mailings where people just started faking sending powder around the country, and it made people even more scared. I hope that doesn't happen here, but the next 24, 48 hours is the key window. Let's hope enough clues were left behind that law enforcement can get the person who did this and do it fast.
Can I just say
I mean, there's no indication that this is over. Yeah, go ahead, Richard, quickly.
Yeah, and I agree that this is not a time for finger pointing, but I hope every Trump apologist can say with a straight face to say, punch him, knock the crap out of him. And it's funny to basically take a reporter and body slam him. I'm waiting for a single
do you realize how, Richard?
Yes.
Richard,
yeah.
do you realize how unfair that sounds? Do you realize that we're talking about probably, you know, a person who is sick or has some, you know, terroristic tendencies, is sending pipe bombs? You know, obviously that kind of language is difficult. We have a very volatile environment. We have, you know, individuals on the other side who are calling for people to be hounded everywhere they go, in malls, in restaurants. You have a baseball field that becomes, you know, a killing field, an attempted killing field. So I think that you have to be so careful to suggest that this is, you know, should be pinned on anyone's feet at this point, at this early in the game.
I'm not at all. I don't ascribe this to Donald Trump. I'm just saying if this is not an opportunity for Donald Trump's apologists to basically say, stop it. It's not funny to talk about these things in front of these big crowds. That's what, you know, somebody either got riled up or not. We'll find out. And I'm not saying it's his fault. I'm just saying this is an opportunity for him to show leadership. That's all.
Got to go. All right. Thank you very much.